Welcome to Podsauce. All right, Leash, you know companion podcasts are huge right now. When there's a TV show, people are then watching the show, and then there's a podcast that goes along the same side as the show to explain details, keep people filled in. And we are going to have one of those podcasts on right now. So obviously on the CW, Two Sentence Horror Stories is huge. It's got a cult following.
We'll get through this, I swear.
What are you doing? Getting us the hell out of here!
What is it? Just silly stories.
And now there is a podcast that follows the show with the same title, Two Sentence Horror Stories, the podcast, and is hosted by Megan Rosati and Danielle Radford. Ladies, welcome to Podsauce.
Welcome to our show.
Hello, thank you for having us.
That was such a great intro, such a great way too. That
It was so nice.
I try.
It almost seems like you do this for a living.
So ladies, get into this. Obviously, Megan, you were a part of the show. You wrote an episode of the show, so that is your connection with Two Sentence Horror Stories.
Correct.
So are you a huge fan of the show still? What made you want to do a companion podcast?
Well, yes, obviously a huge fan of the show. I mean, I think my origin as the co-host of this podcast started when they had me on the podcast last season, and I talked nonstop for 45 minutes and then wrote an email apologizing, saying, I'm so sorry, I just have a lot to say. And they're like, no, we loved it. And as that conversation continued, they were like, why don't you just talk about it for us? I was like, okay. Because, you know, I could go on about social justice and horror, like, for free forever. People are like, please shut up, please stop talking about it. And so when they offered this to me, I was like, oh, yes. And then I heard Danielle was the co-host, and I like screamed and fell over and died and accepted. So
You stop it.
big fan of this girl over
Danielle's
here.
like,
Girl crushed on her from afar.
Yeah.
No, like we are it's like a total mutual girl crush. So yeah, like when I got to meet Megan, like we connected basically immediately over like our love of writing and horror and the show. So it was just like instant chemistry. And like, when do you find that? It was so nice.
And what's your love with the show, Two Sentence Horror Stories, Danielle?
Okay, so I a lot of my job is talking about pop culture, especially things kind of on the fringes of pop culture. And I guess horror really isn't anymore, but for a time it kind of felt like it was. And so big horror babe, loved all of that stuff, loved the show. And so when I got the opportunity to be one of the co-hosts on this, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like Megan said, like, oh, I get to just like talk about a TV show I really like. Oh no, that sounds terrible. oh, wow, that's really difficult. But yeah, so I was really like psyched when they brought me on. I couldn't believe that they wanted me. I was like, me? You want me? But yeah, so it's been a great experience. Again, I love the show. It's kind of because I like horror, but I am very into with any genre when the genre. And this is what genre is for, so it drives me mad when people like insist that it shouldn't do this. The whole point of genre has always been to be an allegory for things that are actually happening, right? Yes. That's kind of what genre does best. And that is, I think, why I have always gravitated towards genre, like sci-fi, fantasy, horror, all that stuff, because like that's what speaks to me.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Danielle, is Two Sentence Horror Story kind of like in the vein of like Us and Get Out,
So it's a horror anthology.
Okay.
So every episode is different. So yeah, I think as far as like
messaging
Get Out
is
or
what I was
Us,
meaning.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in there. I would say think of it as like, you know, a horror Twilight Zone or like something like that, where it's like every episode is going to be a different, coming from a different perspective. It tells a different story. But yes, all of them, because of the people who are in charge and like all of the people who make the show and the folks who write the show and work on the show, they're all very passionate about these issues, and that stuff comes out. Like Megan, you want to talk a little bit about your episode? What you can?
Well, yeah, I mean, mine was about my episode from season 2 was about an owner of a high-end nail salon who exploits her manicurists for their literal body parts so that her rich clients can remain young and beautiful. So if you can't see the metaphor in that, I don't know how to help you, but it happened. I was literally writing this as the world was shutting down from COVID. And so the idea of like hiding your illness from your employer to keep your job was really at the front of mind. And, you know, what I like about the show and why I'm still a fan and why I was a fan in the first place is as a horror like geek, I'm always trying to figure out like what the thing is, like what the twist is, like where the ending's going. And what I like about the show is it takes it just like one notch beyond what you would expect. So if you're the kind of person that sits there and like you're like, oh well, it's the dad. The dad is a ghost and he murdered the family all along, which is like kind of how I roll. When you watch the show, what's so cool is that it takes these same stories and tropes from, like Danielle said, a new perspective from underutilized voices that we haven't necessarily seen, and then like twists the horrorness of it to surprise you, which is what I've always geeked out on about genre.
But I think that's what I love too, Megan, just to piggyback off of what you were saying about messaging, because you definitely want to make sure that we're moving the needle forward with the content that we're creating. And in this day and age, you want to make sure that it's palatable, right? So I like your approach, palatable as in so people can digest it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like boring to me when shows or whatever hit you over the head with like a message or a moral. Like, you know, I've had a hard day. I'm here to just be entertained for a little bit. And so what I like about, you know, the genre approach to it is like, yeah, here's an issue and also vampires. Because then I'm on board. Like, then I'm like relaxed and engaged.
And
I
also
have
vampires.
Yeah, it's a Trojan horse of sexy. They give you the sexy first, and then it's like, oh, but also it's about social issues, and it's like, what? You tricked me. I just wanted to kiss that dude on the mouth.
I was listening to an episode of the show the other day, and one thing that I think is really fun is the enthusiasm that you guys have for this show is so palatable, and it makes your podcast so fun to listen to because you're so excited, it makes your listener excited to listen to it. And hearing these behind the scenes stories from people that work on the show, that to me is always fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that. What is kind of some of the fun stories, or like maybe the best story you've heard from someone that's worked on the show that has stuck in your mind throughout all of your podcasting?
Oh, geez. Okay. So this is, I'm going to get in trouble, but that's okay. I'm going to just say it. So we practice, not to like give away too much of like the hot goss, the hot sauce. So we practice these. And so just to like get everyone used to like the rhythm and how everything goes, everything has rehearsals, right? And so I'm not going to get too into it, but we talked to someone who works a lot with the behind the scenes stuff and the BTS. Megan, you know where I'm going with this, of Two Sentence Horror Stories. And one of the things that they let us know is that there are little Easter eggs in every episode, and some of them are blink if you miss it. But one of the little Easter eggs, and I feel like I can say this, is that if you see that intro, there's that big, beautiful shot of an eye. If you look around in episodes of Two Sentence Horror Stories, there are those eyes or things that allude to that eye everywhere in those episodes. And so now it's like I can't stop seeing it.
That's awesome. That kind of stuff is amazing, especially to those cult-like followers, because you're going to be tuning in every week to watch and look for those little Easter
You kind of
eggs.
equate it to like the Marvel space, right? People who are like in love with all things Marvel. You can see little Easter eggs throughout the, the whole theme. What guests have you guys not had on the show that you want them so desperately? Who are we checking for?
Today we are about to talk to this afternoon. We're going to talk to the Radio Silence guys, aka the directors of the new Scream. Ooh. Yeah. I texted Danielle being like, I'm losing my mind. I'm completely gacked, and I just have to I literally pounded my partner as he was working out on the floor. I was like, hey, Evan. He's like, what? I was like, we're having the Scream guys on. He's like, so? I was like, I'm just excited.
Do you not understand?
Have you guys seen the new Scream? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I did see it, and again in a weird horror community kind of way. I was like, who wants to help me see Scream? And one of my friends who's a movie reviewer who had seen Scream and then had also won tickets to Scream was like, do you want my tickets to the screening? And I was like, yes. And I literally drove across town to the 405 freeway, to a Target next to the freeway, to meet him, to get these tickets because they were physical tickets only. It was like a drug deal, but for horror movies. Like, that's how, like, it took 2 hours out of my day, and that's how committed I was. And yeah, I loved it. I like, I love horror that is fun and funny, as well as like the real disturbing stuff. But what is so great about the Scream movie is that it's just really accessible. And so having these guys on our podcast, like, I fangirl. I've been fangirling them for a minute. So yeah, the coolest part to me is not only like hearing how the sausage was made, right, from the amazing creatives behind it, but also getting to talk to people like the radio silence guys, who I'm like, we can turn the camera off. Like, I'll just put questions at you until you're tired of me. Like, that's how excited I am. So yeah, so that's my and there's other amazing guests coming up, but for today, that's the one I'm geeked out on.
So, Megan, Danielle, one of the beauties of our show is introducing people to podcasts that they have never heard about, they don't know about, and that they can tune in and find out about, like we are doing with your show for a lot of people out there right now. What podcasts are you listening to that you would like to introduce people to? And maybe Danielle, you can go first.
Oh, geez. So I will say week to week, the two podcasts I cannot miss, but Bodega Boys and The Read.
I love The Read. The Read's a good one.
The Read is so good.
I haven't heard Bodega Boys. Yeah, but The Read is good.
The Read is good, and it gives me like that thing I need in my heart. Black History Month, we're doing it.
I spend so much time looking at spooky stuff that, like, when I go on my walks in the sunshine, I just want to like kind of learn with like fun people. So my two faves right now are Maintenance Phase, which is a podcast that like debunks diet myths. That's like like once you finish the diet, you're in the maintenance phase, and they're hilarious. And I learn, and they do stuff like take Karl Lagerfeld's diet book from the 70s and then make fun of it mercilessly. Like 2 cigarettes for breakfast, white wine for lunch, and a raw steak for dinner. I love it. It's so funny.
That's so funny.
And then the other one, this is the very guilty pleasure, is Every Outfit, which is the Sex and the City companion podcast.
Oh my God.
So basically the opposite of Two Sentence Horror Stories.
Right.
All right.
All things sunshine and cheer. Copy.
Yes. And and I love My Favorite Murder and a lot of those other ones. Look, like it's Dear John. I've listened to that podcast a million times.
Oh yeah.
Any podcast about Elizabeth Holmes. I'm there because I want to hear about that one drop of blood. Like, that I'm there.
Oh yeah, if there's a podcast about like a weird true crime story that has been converted into a limited series, I've already listened to it. Like that.
And every version of it, because everyone has made one. Yeah.
Anytime there's a dropout recommendation, I am there for it. And Elizabeth Holmes and her deep voice, bring it on. But Megan, Danielle, thank you guys so much for joining us. And if you guys want to check out the Two Sentence Horror Stories podcast, we will put up a link on podsauce.com directly to their podcast so you can check it out if you are a big fan of the CW show.
This is Podsauce.